Okay, students, I'm going to go through the lesson on how to solve quadratic equations by factoring. I have several examples here to go through so that you can learn the process. Step 1 at the top says set the quadratic equal to 0. Then we will factor each part and set each factored part equal to 0 and then solve for the variable. So on the first question here, we need to set the whole problem equal to 0. You can see right here it says equals 9x. We need to subtract that 9x so that everything's on the same side of the problem. Here's your equal sign. We want to get rid of this 9x so that over here there's 0. So we have x squared and minus 9x plus 18 equals 0. We want to get it so everything's on one side of the equation. Then we're going to factor, and we've already discussed factoring this year. 18, you need to think of the last number in the problem and think of numbers that multiply to give you 18. And those same numbers need to add up to negative 9. 18, let's try 6 times 3. 6 times 3 is 18. If you make both of them negative, they will add up to negative 9. So the factored form is x minus 6 and x minus 3. So now we have two parentheses. You set each factored part to 0. So you make two little equations out of this. You do x minus 6 equals 0 and x minus 3 equals 0. And then you solve those problems really quickly. You can add 6. So one answer is x equals 6, and your other answer is x equals 3. Okay, so you get two answers, x equals 6 and x equals 3. So that's factoring a trinomial. Okay, now this next one, we want to again do the same steps. We want to get everything together on one side of the equation. So we'd want to add 4 to each side. So we have 2x squared plus 6x plus 4 equals 0. Now this equation, I see everything this has a 2 in it, this is 6, this is 4. I see everything are as even numbers. So I can divide everything by 2, take out the greatest common factor. I'll just write that on the side. Greatest common factor is 2. So you want to divide by 2. That gives you x squared plus 3x plus 2 equals 0. So you factor out that 2. Then this part in the parentheses, we can break that apart. Again, you could make a x. We were trying to figure out things that multiply to make 2, like 2 times 1, and 2 and 1 add up to 3. So that should work. It's going to be x plus 2 and x plus 1 equals 0. Then anything with a variable in it, I apologize for my camera work. I'm just holding my phone and trying to do this quickly at home so you have it for class. So then the next part, each thing with a variable, these parts you equal to 0. You don't have to worry about the 2 because you can't do 2 equals 0. So you just have to do the parts with the variables. You have x plus 2 equals 0 and x plus 1 equals 0. So if you solve those really quickly, you'd have to subtract 2 to solve this one. You'd have to subtract 1 to solve this one. So you get the answer negative 2, x equals negative 2, and negative 1. Two answers, negative 2 and negative 1. Okay, we'll go over here to the third example. And again, we need to get everything on one side of the equation. We have to minus the 8x. So 16x squared minus 8x equals 0. And again, we need to figure out the greatest common factor. You just have to think, like, do they have anything in common? They have 8x in common. So you're going to want to factor out an 8x. You just take out 8x. So if you do 16 divided by 8, you get 2. X squared divided by x is x. 8x divided by 8x is 1. See? So you factor it. Now these two factored things you equal to 0. This is 8x equals 0, and 2x minus 1 equals 0. And then we're going to solve those equations. If this one, you just have to divide by 8. 0 divided by 8 is 0. This equation here, you have to add 1. And then divide by 2. So x equals 1/2. X equals 1/2. So far we have 0 and 1/2. Okay, so every problem you're getting 2 answers. Last one here, if you subtract the 17, let's see, x squared, 13 minus 17, that would be -4 equals 0. This is called a difference of squares, and we've seen these before. 4 is a perfect square number, so you could just break it apart. 2 times 2 is 4. 1's plus 2 and 1's minus 2. The difference of squares, the subtraction problems we've had, that's back in your notes. If you flip back a few pages from right before Christmas, you just factor it into 2 parentheses. 1's x plus 2, 1's x minus 2. Again, you set these equal to 0 to solve them. So one answer is -2, and one answer is +2. So we're getting -2 and +2. Okay, then we have to open up to the inside of the next page. And here's another problem at the top, factoring. This one has a number in front, a coefficient that's not a 1. But we're just going to break it apart and do like a guess and check. You can just break the 15 apart. So you want to think like 3 times 5 is 15, obviously. There's a way to break it apart. So this would be 3x and 5x. So you look at the first number. Then you look at the last number, 1. The only way to make 1 is 1 times 1. So these have to be 1s in here. Now if we check with FOIL, we've all used FOIL before. If we check this, it's like, where does this 8 number come in? We have to check and make sure we can add up to this -8. Well, we just check these outside terms. 3 times 1 is 3. That's 3x. And if you check the inside, 1 times 5 is 5x. And we can make those add up to -8. If we make both of these negative, they will add up to -8. So we want both of these to be negative in the problem so that we can get this -8 in the middle term. So again, if you it's like a guess and check. If you use FOIL, we know that these two terms make 15. The outside is -3, the inside is -5x. Those -3x and -5x add up to 8x. And finally, -1 times -1 is +1. So you can check with FOIL. Now again, we set these factored, we got it factored, so we set these factored parts equal to 0. And then we solve these equations. So if we add 1 on this, you get 3x equals 1. Divide by 3, x equals 1/3. See that? And this one, we add 1, and then we would have to divide by 5, and you get another fraction. So this one, you get x equals 1/3 and 1/5. You get those two answers, 1/3 and 1/5. Okay, so you can see the answers we're getting. Like here we got a fraction. The other pages, the first page we did, we got 2 answers on each problem. Okay, so if sometimes they're going to actually give you the answer to the problem, and then you have to come up with the equation, write a quadratic equation in standard form if you're given these numbers. Well, you can see how this works. If you get a fraction 1/3, then the equation was 3x minus 1. So it's kind of interesting, like the denominator of that fraction is in front. If your answer is just a solid number, like if the answer was 2, then the factored part was x minus 2. So if they give you the answer to a problem, you could write like the parentheses, and then you can figure out what the original problem was. It's kind of like working backwards. So if they give you the answer 2 and -3, we can make like a parentheses problem, like this FOIL, 2 parentheses, and you know, if the answer was 2, then the factored piece would have been x minus 2, like x minus that number equal to 0. You solved it, then you got 2. So it's kind of like working backwards. It's kind of interesting. You just put these answers in parentheses, you subtract x minus this number and x minus this -3 number. Well, when it's x minus 2, that's fine. And then when you're doing minus -3, that actually turns to +3. Now if we distribute this, we will get the problem in standard form. If you distribute everything, that's the FOIL stuff that we've learned. First multiply these x's, then the outside, then the inside, then the last. So if we distribute everything, your equation, x times x is x squared. Then you do the outside, you get 3x. Inside is -2x. And then -2 times 3 is -6. And then you could add stuff up to get the final answer. Y equals x squared. And then put these together. So it'd be x squared plus x minus 6. See, 3 and 2 make 1x. Okay, so this is your final answer. And here's another one just to show you if there's a fraction. If there's a fraction answer, kind of like our fraction answers up here, then the bottom number of the fraction goes before, so see that? The bottom number of the fraction goes before the x. So this one will be x minus -5, that's just your whole number, but this fraction one, the 2 is going to go here. It'll be 2x minus 1. See, it'll be 2. The 2 goes before the x. 2x minus 1. And again, this is like x plus 5 times 2x minus 1. Distribute everything. X times 2x would be 2x squared. And this y comes down, it's y equals. So it's 2x squared minus 1x plus 10x minus 5. And you can combine these, so you'd get 2x squared plus 9x minus 5. And there's your answer for that one. Okay, last, you'll have a few of these number theory questions on your homework. Find 2 consecutive even integers. Oops, sorry about that. Find 2 consecutive even integers. Even numbers like 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. Find 2 consecutive even numbers whose product is 288. Even numbers go by 2's. You know, like I was listing off, like 2, 4, 6, 8, etc. Even integers. So we're thinking of numbers like that. Well, if we don't know what those numbers are, the first number first number could be just called x. Then the second number, if we don't know what it is, but we know it's even, don't we know it's like 2 higher? Like if you're going 2, 4, 6, 8, aren't these going up by 2 every time? So if the first number is a mystery number, we don't know what it is, you put a variable like x, then the second number is 2 higher than the first one. The second number is x plus 2. So our first number is x, our next number is 2 higher than the first number. Now it says their product. What's the word product mean? The product means multiply. Product means multiply. So if we multiply these together, x times x plus 2, we're supposed to get an answer of 288. Okay, so that's how you're going to set it up. Even numbers go by 2s. If it wouldn't have been even, like if it just said 2 consecutive, if it would have just said consecutive, then, you know, like consecutive is like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So if it would have said just consecutive, then you could just go like plus 1. Like one number is mystery, like x, and one number is 1 higher. But when it says even, that goes by 2s. Odd also goes by 2s. Okay, now we need to distribute this out. Okay, so we're trying to solve this, so we need to work out this problem. This gives us x squared plus 2x equals 288. Then we do like we did on the front of this paper. It said to get this equation equal to 0. So you have to minus 288 and equal the problem to 0. Bring the 288 over. Now we should be able to factor this and solve it. Think of some numbers that multiply to give you 288. And this is where you're going to need to grab a calculator and figure out some numbers that would work. Like 4 goes in the number, 4 times 72. That's a possibility, but the middle number is 2. So we have to find numbers that, like these numbers have to add up to 2. Add or subtract to make 2. Well, we're trying to multiply to make 288. I tried some different ones. Let's see. 288, I think 16 goes into 288. Just grab a calculator and divide 288 by 16 and see what works. Just grab a calculator and do it. So let's see, 16 divided by 288. 16, let me think about that. 16 goes in there once. That'd be 12, that'd be 128. Just divide it by 16. 16 goes in there once. That'd be 12. And then was it 8? I'll have to check. 48, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Yep, it's 18. So it's 16 times 18. 16 times 18 is 288. 16 times 18. So I'm getting 18 minus 16 would give you 2. See, so you just have to take some time and figure it out. So we get x minus 16 and x plus 18. And then you equal those to 0. And I'll just put that over here on the side. So then you would do x minus